Hello and welcome to Headliners, where we travel back through time to revisit some of football's most unforgettable stories. It's 1985, and the trickle of talented young South Australians heading east to try their luck in the VFL is about to become a flood. Three youngsters by the name of Stephen Kernahan, Craig Bradley and Peter Motley are dominating the SANFL and have proven themselves more than capable on the big State of Origin stage. Two of them will go on to stellar Hall of Fame careers and be recognised as all-time greats, while the other is, at this point, universally considered to be the most exciting prospect of the three. But his football story will have an altogether different ending. The Peter Motley story. Welcome to Headliners.
It's made me more determined than ever to play next year.
Carmen, you're in. There's Hudson in the hands of the...
Peter Mark Motley was born in Semaphore, Adelaide on September 24, 1964. The second of three children, Peter is born of fine athletic stock. Peter's mother Gaynor represents Australia in both netball and basketball and played state softball, while his father Jeff is a South Australian football legend, winning the 1964 Magarey medal and playing in 9 premierships with Port Adelaide before embarking on a coaching career with Port and North Adelaide.
He is an icon, Jeff, of South Australian football. They're a remarkable family, they're a very highly respected family, and I have a great respect and admiration for the Motley family.
Jeff was a complete athlete, very talented, very courageous footballer, won the Magarey medal. So he was a talent. Peter is an offshoot, it's in the genes.
Peter has grown up living, loving and breathing all things sport, particularly Australian rules football. An outstanding natural talent from the first time he laces a boot, Motley represents South Australia at both primary and secondary school levels. A fanatical Port Adelaide supporter, the Magpies have the option of selecting him via his family connection, but they never extend the invitation. Peter following his schoolmates to Sturt instead, where he quickly progresses the ranks to join the senior side at 17 and never looks back. Despite the enormous pressure of being the son of a legend, Peter Motley does not disappoint, and a new South Australian footballing star is born.
Well, he was always a year younger. Braddles and I, and blokes like Chris McDermott and Andrew Jarman. When we started playing league football, we knew, being a year younger, we sort of knew about this kid Motley. We knew how good he was in the juniors, and we knew he was coming through.
He played for Sturt, I played for Port, other side of the tracks. They were the toffs, so to speak. We weren't. You know, we just sort of knocked around together a fair bit and just became close that way, as you do. And, you know, obviously we played against each other plenty of times.
Well, I stood in one day. I don't think Mott's played centre back too often. I was centre forward for Glenelg, and he was a ruck rover. He just played on ball, and he ran all over the ground. Mott's was, perfect for on-ball footy. And I just remember days where, you know, the stats read when he played for Sturt, 30 kicks, 10 handballs, 18 marks, that sort of thing. He's a ruck rover, bouncing around all day. He was a gun footballer, good bloke.
Peter Motley was nearly going to be the best that left this state, I think. He was an absolute champion. Play anywhere, play any position on the ground. Smooth as silk, absolutely fearless, scrupulously fair, a gifted player, absolute beauty. And what a great guy. I watched him all the way through, and I had him way up there with the best that this state produced.
He did play either 1 or 2 State of Origin matches for South Australia, because at that time I was actually a state selector, and he certainly was not out of his depth.
Peter Motley lines up on Geelong superstar Gary Ablett in the 1985 state game and proceeds to tear Victoria's hottest player apart. Motley hauls in 17 marks. Ablett shifted away from Peter, who collects the coveted Foss Williams medal as best of field for the South Australians.
Basically, he was a bit like a Malcolm Blight, I thought. You know, he was mobile, and, you know, he had a terrific leap, and, you know, he was a good kick as well. And, you know, he was a brilliant footballer. And, you know, at that time, Adelaide had some terrific young players coming through the underage, and Peter was probably the best of us.
Think of James Hird, but Motts was more spectacular than James Hird. I mean, he could do anything on the field. As I said, take hangers everywhere. He took mark of the day twice a week in Adelaide. He had South Australian footy by the balls, you'd say, and he was ready for Victoria.
Tackles, does it well too. Whittlesey this time, but the handball's not strong enough. Drea's there. Whittlesey, Motley, Sturt get a goal.
And the Victorians are more than ready for Motley, who has become one of the hottest footballing properties in the country. The race is on to secure his prized signature, with the Sydney Swans appearing to be in the box seat.
I went over to Adelaide with a group of us, Barry Round and Mark Browning, Bernie Evans and myself, when he'd signed a Form 4 with the Sydney Swans. So gone over to meet Motts and Jeff and the family and that, and, you know, to convince them that, you know, going to the Swans was the right thing to do.
None of us wanted to leave South Australia, I can safely say that. We all wanted to play in South Australia. We loved the competition, but at some stage you just had to try and test yourself. And we thought, well, you know, why not join up and play for the same team? And, you know, we're good mates. Let's just enjoy it. It's going to be hard enough over there as it is.
Peter and Craig were a double, and what a double it was. But you had to convince both that they were going to the one club, and there's a fair bit of work I had to put in there to get them.
Ian Collins and his Carlton recruiting team move heaven and earth to secure Motley and Bradley. The Form 4s tying them to Sydney and Essendon respectively have expired, releasing them as free agents once more. The Blues pounce, also signing long-time target Stephen Kernahan and Western Australian John Dorotich in one of the greatest single recruiting hauls in football history. Carlton coach David Parkin most excited about securing the signature of Motley.
He was a 6'2", running half-back, half-forward, ruck rover type player who was brilliant in the air, but equally had his long arms, etc., and this great flexibility in his play, but equally as happy on the ground. Motley could run like Bradley and had this aerial component, almost like Kernahan when you think of the three.
He came across with Stephen Kernahan and Craig Bradley. Now, both all-time greats, both of those two, but good judges said that Peter Motley was the equal of those two and would have stood up with whatever they did.
He rang me every second or third week during the 1985 season. On a Sunday night, I get a phone call from him, and he would talk through his game and the role that he'd played and how could he improve this and what should he do about that. The only single player in my history as a coach who was talking about his development as a player prior to even arriving at the Carlton Footy Club. The greatest disappointment for me, when I think about it now, is that I've not had the opportunity to coach him in that initial period. He was just a wonderful young man.
Parkin is replaced as Carlton coach by Robert Walls at the end of the 1985 season, just as Kernahan, Bradley and Motley are preparing to leave home and head for Melbourne to try their luck in the big time.
It's just something that I've got to do. I guess every player wants to play in the best competition, and I'm no different.
Yeah. Have you got a plan to stay there a certain number of years, or do you feel that you might even finish your career there?
Well, I don't know. I haven't got a plan at all. I guess that would depend on success.
But before the fanatical Motley can board the plane to sink his teeth into his first gruelling VFL pre-season, he suffers an injury that will set him back for the bulk of season 1986.
He was having to kick with his mates and he'd buggered up his ankle. He did all the ligaments and God knows what. So when we came over and started, he was not on a level playing field. He wasn't right to go. He couldn't do all the pre-season and that just sort of was killing him.
Basically, he came across in plaster and was a long way behind everybody else, and people don't realise that, you know, he had to overcome that before he played his first game.
He was training when he probably shouldn't have been training because he just wanted to get out there instead of just resting it a bit more. So that set him back at the start.
Despite starting well behind the rest of the playing group, Peter Motley works himself into the ground to make up for lost time.
He was always the first at training, always the last to leave. He'd train on the off nights. He just, at home, he'd stay with a ball in his hands all the time.
He was supremely fit and, as I said, not an ounce of body fat on him. He'd be eating, he'd walk around the house eating a raw potato. He does that. I mean, I don't mind, you know, watching the diet and things like that, but eating raw potatoes and things like that, I mean, but that was his way.
Motley makes his long-awaited VFL debut in round 2 of 1986, despite missing most of the pre-season. Significantly underdone, he just hasn't been able to get the necessary miles in his legs to catch up.
Probably his first half dozen games, He was on and off the ground a bit, and that's something that had never happened to him before. I think that was probably about the time that we settled him on the half-back flank, and from that point on, he just started to blossom as a player.
His determination, that's his biggest strength. You know, he was a pretty player to watch, you know, very elegant, had a massive leap on him, very rangy with his arms, and just could take a spectacular mark. And I think that was the thing that people liked about Motz's game the most was, you know, it's a bit like Gavin Wanganeen can take these marks that somehow his body twists and turns and so courageous that, you know, he had the work ethic. Even though he was, you know, had these high marks, he was still a running player, and he was so dedicated and determined. He just willed himself on games. A lot of those players that are elegant to watch don't will themselves through games. Well, he did that.
Braddles is as good an athlete as I've ever seen, and you know, Motz was, you know, probably the equal. They were different size. Motz was a bit bigger, and they settled him off a half-back flank, I think he probably would have said, and he was just starting to go pretty well, and it was being groomed to go on ball.
Towards the end of the year, and in the finals, you could see playing off a half-back flank mainly. He was starting to really develop.
He was just a natural, you know. He's a natural runner. He's a natural mark. He's just like a jack in the box. He was jumping all over the place. He's a beautiful mark, good kick, had everything. You know, he was a physical fitness fanatic, and probably a perfect play.
Peter Perfect, I suppose, is the easiest way to put it. He was just a magnificent athlete, and you know, he wore the gel and all that sort of stuff, and he, you know, was worried about his looks all the time. But other than that, he was just a terrific athlete and a great clubman, and you know, great to have around the place.
Peter Perfect, as David Rees-Jones refers to him, continues to get better and better as his match fitness improves and he adjusts to the additional pace and ferocity of the VFL. Motley polls Brownlow votes in 2 of the last 4 games of the season, providing invaluable aerial strength, run and creative flair off half-back for the Blues as they storm into the 1986 Grand Final, only to be stopped in their tracks by seasoned campaigners Hawthorn. Carlton look ahead to 1987, determined to make amends for their failure. And no one is keener to prove their worth to the football world than Peter Motley, who, at 22 years of age, is longing for the chance to show Victorian fans just how much he's truly capable of. A season that Peter Motley will never forget. That's next on Headliners.
He was just a bit of a Hollywood. He'd be pretty popular and super fit. You know, he's really a footy nut, and he had a great job. You know, he was almost, he had the perfect world.
Channel. Welcome back to Headliners. South Australian star Peter Motley arrived at Carlton as one of football's hottest young prospects. But an ankle injury just prior to his first pre-season prevented him from showing Victorian fans his best throughout his debut season of 1986. With the Blues humiliated by Hawthorn on Grand Final day, the entire team enters the 1987 pre-season desperate to make amends. Fitness fanatics Motley and best mate Craig Bradley, as always, out the front of the training group.
We're pretty dedicated and we have lofty ambitions at that stage. Both very, you know, goal-orientated, so we're sort of pushing each other in some ways. You know, you live with your mate, you want to make sure that you're both doing well and you help each other.
Of course, to have Braddles and Motts come along who were non-drinkers, non-smokers, non-anything, except wanting to play football and look after themselves was probably a bit unique at that time.
Everyone would be pretty stuffed, and he'd make a point of jumping up and bouncing around at the front. And, you know, I'm sure he was showing off. I'm sure that... and that's part of being a sportsman, you know. Like, he's just wanted everyone to know, hey, I'm still going here. You know, I'm ready for more. He was sending a message. He will say he wasn't, but no, he wasn't. Why else would you be jumping up, touching leaves? He just wanted us all to know, look, I've got more in the tank, and if we want to go around again, I'm right.
Going into his second season, he was ready to just show the footy world how good he was. I can remember we played practice matches that summer of 87. And there was a particular game we played at Maryborough in country Victoria, and we let him loose as a ruck rover, you know, his favourite position. And I reckon he had a point to prove. He said, OK, well, for 12 months you've sort of had the reins on me. Now I'm just going to show you what I can do.
He was just, look, as I said, he was ready to take it on. I remember that day at Maryborough, I sat on the bench. I had a groin injury, and I sat on the bench for the first half, and Motts was dominating all over the place.
He took 2 or 3 real speckies and... you know, it just looked like he was going to be anything.
certainly coming to the 87 year was showing some very powerful signs. He developed in confidence and understanding of what the game was suddenly to be and all about, and Colo made some statements to me that he felt that Peter was going to be quite exceptional and was heading in the right direction, and if anything a little bit ahead of target at that point of time.
And he was bigger and he was stronger and he'd had a year of VFL behind him, and he was just sensational, and I just thought, gee, you know, we really have got a player here. And the start of 87 he was playing more in the midfield.
Carlton's star-studded lineup starts 1987 strongly, with 4 wins in the opening 6 rounds to be sitting 1 game behind the Swans in second position. Motley has moved into the midfield rotation and is blossoming under the added responsibility and opportunity. So as he climbs into his car to head home after Thursday night's training and team meeting, life could barely be better. Football has been his sole focus for as long as he can remember, and here he is rising quickly through the ranks of one of the greatest teams in the game. He can barely wait to get to Saturday's game against Geelong at Waverley. Maybe he'll even get another shot at Gary Ablett. But fate is about to deal him a blow far more brutal than anything the great Geelong superstar could ever muster.
We had a routine where we would train Thursday night, then the senior players, we would have a team dinner at the club, and then after the team dinner we would have the team meeting, and that was just, you know, the normal for us. So we probably wound up, might have been around about 8 o'clock, and you'd then head home.
I was quite close with Pete, just the fact that Pete was next to my locker, and you know, obviously there was a lot more conversation than going down to locker 21 with Rattles was. We were just sitting in the change rooms. I remember vividly just sitting on the ground and just discussing, you know, certain things with other players, and you know, we went to the team meeting. Once the team meeting was over and done with, we basically went on our merry way.
I can remember that training night in the change rooms before we left for some reason, just all standing around, and I guess it was strange because we normally drive home together. You know, we drive to and from training together, and for some reason I think Pete's girlfriend at the time, he might have been going over her house after the training. That might have been why he took his car.
I was living in Eaglemont with Glazer. We were sharing a house, and Motts was in another part of Ivanhoe with Braddles, and you know, we were obviously both heading in the same direction, and both sort of came together in general traffic up to the intersection where Smith Street comes into Queens Parade, and we were stopped at the lights. Lights changed to green. Motts took off, I took off as well, probably 2 car lengths behind him. We probably progressed from that intersection about, I'm guessing 60 or so metres. We just passed the fenced area of the tram zone, and all of a sudden just another car just seemed to appear out of nowhere from my right and just, you know, collided with an incredible impact into the driver's side of Motts's car. The thing I remember, the car had obviously actually hit the concrete strip, and was actually, you know, it just seemed like, to me at the time, it seemed like it had come out of the sky. It would actually hit Motts's car almost on a 45-degree angle to the ground. The force of that impact knocked Peter's car right out of view, and you know, from memory, it probably knocked it a good 15 metres. It ended up on a grass verge facing the same direction. I just had a split second to realise, you know, shit, this car is coming at me now, and was spinning at whether it had done a full 360 before it hit me, it just, horizontal spin pretty close to the ground, and I just remember closing my eyes, hanging on for dear life to the steering wheel, and it just took the front of my car, virtually stoved it in almost up to the window, and I closed my eyes for that instant. You know, when I opened my eyes, I could see the Commodore, I think, just to my left. It was written off as mine was, and Motts's car just across behind it, sitting on the grass. You know, obviously badly smashed from in Motts's driver's side. I'm hazy, I guess, on what happened after that, and I guess I can put that some level of shock. But my recollection is getting out of the car. I can recollect I didn't want to go over. From what I'd seen, the impact was so severe. I didn't think it was survivable. I just thought that Motts would have been, would have been dead.
Unbeknownst to him at the time, Motley, as he's affectionately known through the football world, has already polled 12 votes to be the shock runaway leader of the 1987 Brownlow medal, with 4 consecutive best on grounds between rounds 2 and 5. But suddenly, football seems a million miles away as he staggers over to his teammate's mangled vehicle, bracing himself for the worst.
By this time, people had come out from there were terraces, sort of houses along the, adjacent to the road at that point. A guy that basically said he was a doctor, basically had came in and opened the passenger side door. I believe had got into the car and was actually assessing Peter. I was there. My recollection is looking through the passenger side door. Certainly Motts was out, eyes closed, obviously unconscious. I'm not sure how long what I did. For whatever reason, I have a memory of the doctor actually constructing a brace out of newspaper or something to sort of stabilise his head. At some point, I left that car, having established that a doctor, an ambulance had been rung, and I went into one of the houses and actually rang the club.
Peter Motley's chance of surviving long enough for the ambulance to even reach him is slim at best. The ferocious impact had split his skull from between his eyebrows to the top of his crown, a gaping wound some 6 centimetres wide that has to be physically held together to slow the massive blood loss until the paramedics arrive for the unconscious Peter to have any hope of survival. Paul Meldrum's personal recollection of those hectic minutes immediately after the collision is understandably clouded due to his surging adrenaline and the initial onset of mild shock. Those close to Peter have always been of the belief that Paul actually held Peter's skull together, thereby saving his life. However, Paul can't, to this day, actually recall performing this heroic act, but he can't categorically discount it either.
I'm really hazy about what happened in the car, and I've got vague recollections about maybe assisting the GP that came out from the house in stuff around the brace. I have no recollection, to be honest, about actually doing anything about the wound, I guess the wound.
Paul has never spoken about the accident until now. Not with the Motleys, not with anyone else at the club, and certainly never publicly. But his courage in coming forward to speak with us has immediately introduced a previously unknown element to this story: the Good Samaritan, the doctor who emerged from the terrace houses to assist in Peter's time of need. Up until now, Peter's family and friends have been completely unaware of the presence of any third person assisting in the vehicle. This mystery doctor, who, according to Paul's humble personal account, took control of the situation and assisted Meldrum in keeping his friend alive. Meanwhile, Peter Motley's closest mate and fellow Carlton star, Craig Bradley, is stuck some 20 cars back in the traffic jam immediately created by the accident, totally oblivious to the dramas unfolding in front of him.
I would have been, 100 metres or so behind him. But I didn't realise that, a couple of the guys had jumped out of their cars, pedestrians, and were just waving their arms as if to say there's been an accident up here and, don't even try and come through here. And because of the slope of the road and everything, I couldn't see who was up there. But there was a side street to my right. And I just quickly zipped around and actually thought to myself, geez, I was lucky could have been stuck in this traffic for a while there, I had no idea what was going on until I got home and our unit, I knew Motts was ahead of me, and the door went up for our garage, and his car wasn't in the garage, and I thought to myself, just for a split second, I thought that's strange, but straight away I dismissed it because I thought, he's gone over Andy's house, his girlfriend at the time. Got a phone call about probably 40 minutes later. It was a barman at Carlton. And he just said, look, Paul Meldrum's rung here saying something about Peter's been in an accident. And I knew straight away, I just knew straight away that must have been it.
Peter Motley lies within a grotesque disfiguration of mangled metal as the deafening explosion echoes off into an eerie silence over Clifton Hill. It will take a minor miracle for this brilliant young man with the perfect life and the football world at his feet to even survive long enough for the ambulances to make it to him. Peter Motley's fight for life. That's when we return next time on Headliners.
But I remember saying to Pete, his heart was just thumping. I'd never seen a heartbeat so fast, just almost coming out of his chest, which was... You wouldn't have thought a body could actually do that, But anyway, I remember saying you know, Mott's, you know, there's people going everywhere. And I said, Mott's, it's Braddles, you know, like, I'm here, mate, I'm here. And the ambulance guy just said, look, no, mate, just don't worry about it.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, where we travel back through time to reopen the case files on some of football's most compelling stories. It's Thursday, May 7, 1987, and young up-and-coming Carlton star Peter Motley lies critically injured in the wreckage of his car, which has been severely sideswiped by an out-of-control vehicle on the way home from training. Motley's teammate, Paul Meldrum, was piloting the car behind Peter's, the offending vehicle also destroying Paul's car before coming to a stop in the middle of the road. As Meldrum clambers out of his vehicle, the harrowing gravity of the situation hits him hard. Motley's car has been totally caved in on the driver's side. In Meldrum's own words, it just doesn't look survivable. 5 minutes ago, life could barely have been better for Peter Motley. Now he's barely alive at all. The remarkable conclusion to the Peter Motley story. Welcome to Headliners.
It's made me more determined than ever to play next year. There's Hudson in the hand of the
22-year-old Peter Motley has the football world at his feet. A brilliantly gifted high-marking utility, he is starting to blossom for Carlton in the early stages of 1987 after suffering an injury-interrupted debut the previous season. But the injured ankle that hampered his first pre-season pales into insignificance when compared to the horrific internal and external damage he's just suffered in this devastating collision. Teammate and best friend Craig Bradley has been notified of the accident and races straight to the scene, where he's confronted by the sickening sight of Peter's mangled sports car.
It was just smashed, the car, you know, so whoever was in it is not in a good way, you know, and I knew it was Pete's car, so yeah. And just the fact that the ambulance was still there after, what, 45 minutes, an hour, tells you that they couldn't move him straight away. They're obviously, they had to work on him straight away. And I'm thinking, Jesus, what's going on here? I looked in all the ambulances, there was only one to go, so I knew he was in that one. And yeah, look, I walked around the back of it and his heart was just thumping. I'd never seen a heartbeat so fast, you know, just almost coming out of his chest, which was, you wouldn't have thought a body could actually do that, you know, but anyway. I remember saying, you know, Mott's, you know, there's people going everywhere. And I said, Mott's, it's Braddles, you know, like, I'm here, mate, I'm here. And the ambulance guy just said, look, you know, mate, just don't worry about it at the moment. Just let us go at the moment. We're working pretty hard here.
Motley is whisked off to St Vincent's Hospital. Bradley given a chilling prognosis that Peter's chances of making it through the night are less than 30%. He now faces the unenviable task of informing the family.
Hey, how you going, Braddles? You know, she was in a real happy mood. That was her answer. G'day, Mrs. Mott. G'day, Braddles. And I thought, oh, I just said, Mrs. Mott, I need to talk to Jeff, you know, straight away. I couldn't tell her. I just couldn't tell her. And Jeff come on the phone, he was happy, and I said, mate, I've got something to tell you and it's serious.
Braddles had extreme difficulty telling me what had happened. I know he made the statement like, just brace yourself, but he couldn't get it out. And there was a doctor with him who, I can't recall his name, who then said that he's in a serious accident, he's in intensive care.
The phone rang, it was Stephen Goff, football manager at the time at Carlton, and he told me that he'd heard that there'd been an accident involving Peter. And I just thought, yeah, you know, hope he's okay, and, you know, didn't think too much more of it. And then he rang me about 10 minutes later. He said, look, it appears as if he might have a broken leg. And I thought, oh, gee, what a disappointment for Peter and for us. He rang about half an hour later and he told me it was a matter of life and death. And you just, absolute shock. You forget football. Football doesn't matter. Here's a young man fighting for his life.
And what a fight it will be. Peter has suffered massive head trauma and internal injuries. Doctors amazed at his fighting spirit and physical strength as he defies overwhelming odds to make it through that first night and into Friday. His parents fly in from Adelaide first thing the next morning as the football world awakes to the stunning news that one of its most popular up-and-coming young stars isn't expected to survive through the weekend.
Oh, I found out the next morning, actually. I woke up and my mum actually had mentioned that she'd heard on radio, and I think it may have been in the paper that morning, I'm not too sure, but said that, you know, that Pete had been in a car accident.
It just seems so sort of surreal almost. That how could this elite athlete and this bloke who was just actually starting to build his reputation in Melbourne suddenly be critically injured?
He was so badly hurt and the car so badly damaged himself. You know, the first call was he'd be lucky to see it through. So that's, you know, made it, you know, I don't know if anyone slept for the next week. It was pretty tough, and to get out and play on the weekend was even tougher.
The Blues have a game against Geelong at Waverley the very next day. They arrive at the ground with their much-loved teammate Peter Motley in a condition so critical that it's quite conceivable that he may well pass away while the game is actually in progress.
I just remember the rooms were so quiet before the game. There was no rah-rah. We were in shock. We had a mate, you know, close to death at that stage, was more likely not to survive.
There was just a whole sort of, I guess the atmosphere was just, you know, the club was totally stunned. You know, Motts was obviously in a coma at this point, and so it was really just everyone, not a lot being said, but just, I guess everyone was just hoping that he was going to make it through.
When we're out on the ground, I think Wayne Johnson, and just before we went to our positions, he called for a minute's silence. You know, and the whole side just sort of stood in a circle and bowed its head. And that cracked me up. That was pretty hard because I was sort of, you know, in a different mode.
We all came together and we said, let's do it for Peter, and Jono was really emotional, I know that, and I was really quiet. You know, I just couldn't comprehend what was going on.
We weren't going to lose that game. No way.
Despite the agonising trauma of the previous 48 hours, Craig Bradley stars in Carlton's remarkable 56-point win over the fourth-placed Cats.
Braddles was in a bit of turmoil, as you know, as a best mate, and all our best friends, but Braddles and him had a special friendship and lived together. And you know, I was in the hospital for the next 3 weeks. I was there day and night. You know, I think the only time I wasn't there was training and getting to sleep.
We've never ever known who was responsible in the other car for it, but there was no point we considered in doing any of this because you can't change what occurred. The priority was helping Peter, not trying to seek any other redress.
The Motley family are tight, tough and fiercely loyal. They simply refuse to accept the pessimistic predictions regarding Peter's chances of pulling through and set about a coordinated bedside vigil.
I know what we were told, but we had one alternative: to give in to what we were told or work on what we could possibly do. We were pretty helpless, but having said that, we did all that we could, and talking to Peter was the key criteria. And I used to go there and sit with him and talk with him and say, I'm here, son, and you're looking strong, we're going to find a way.
Pete's unconscious, what do? You know, you want to talk to him, and they say that, you know, it's great to just have your conversations, and because, you know, you never know, they might be able to hear. Peter loved his fandom comics. He was a member of the fandom club or something. I think he still is. Part of all the process, we just used to read fandom comics.
Despite this physically and emotionally taxing ritual, Craig Bradley will go on to poll Brownlow votes in 4 of the next 6 games. A champion inspired by the courage and fight of his best mate, who lies in a coma, hovering between life and death.
He would open his eyes, but everything wouldn't register as we understood it. He was not only not able to speak, he was partially deaf on one side, partially blind on another side, but we knew that he was out of back to consciousness then when he responded to a command, and that was probably about 10 days, thereabouts.
So for that 10 days, was his life in the balance that entire time?
Yes, very much so, and he picked up some other serious injuries as well, because his chest and lung was seriously affected by this, and we had to overcome other difficulties besides his brain damage side of the left-hand side of his head.
Those times in ICU were difficult times, and I suppose the most difficult when they took him off life support and to see whether he would survive, and you know, there was no guarantee that was going to happen.
The most difficult thing about it was, you know, as the weeks went on, because his muscles started to waste, you know, and you could just see him wasting away, and that was really difficult to see that, you know, one of your best mates is just lying there and, you know, he was just wasting away.
You know, it's tough to see him like that, but also great to see him that was alive. And as I said, you know, you've got to remember when it first happened, those first few days, we were getting prepared. They wanted to get through it all, so it was great to see him. And he was alert, his eyes were open, and you know, I think he was acknowledging that we're in the room.
Peter Motley is growing stronger by the day. Out of his coma, he still has a long way to go, but with the remarkable support of his family, friends, teammates and medical staff, he will continue to defy the odds and live. After the break, we'll hear from Peter Motley himself as he fights to adapt to his new life. That's next on Headliners.
People used to come to me and they say, "How are you going?" And then they didn't realise that I can speak.
They can understand.
And they go, "How are you going?"
Welcome back to Headliners. If not for Peter Motley's remarkable physical fitness, he would not have survived the horrendous injuries inflicted upon him in the sickening car accident on May 7, 1987. Now out of his coma, he's surrounded by loved ones determined to nurse him back to health. He must learn to talk again and walk again. Life will never be the same. Every day its own individual battle for a man who seemingly had the perfect life.
People can't possibly imagine what it's like. You wake up where you can't speak, you don't know what's happened, you can't recall what's happened, and the entire right-hand side of your body is not functioning. I've always considered Peter as being one of the bravest people I've ever known. To be able to cope with and still remain sane with that, where you can't speak and can't understand why and you can't accept what's gone on, to be so physically fit as he was, and to lose in something like about 10 days, 22 kilos, and he had no weight to lose. That was pretty hard stuff.
As I was had a downer, and Dad had always sort them sorted out and get up on them and get a focus. You've got to get back on the level.
It's a total rearrangement of your life. What you were before, you're never ever going to be again. My wife and I stayed at Peter's unit out at Heidelberg. There was a knock on the unit door, and there was this man, Bruce Stall, standing with a small little bouquet of flowers, and just said to me, "I just had to come, Mr. Motts." And we spoke for 2 or 3 minutes only. He said, "I've got to go now," and off he went. But he made the effort to come a long way just to be there. Such was the relationship between he and Peter, which Peter still cherishes to this day.
Peter throws himself into his rehabilitation with all the courage and determination that made him the fantastic footballer that he was. He recovers sufficiently to attend a game late in the 1987 season. All eyes on Peter Motley once again as he stars at Princes Park.
As we went to go in and sit down, the game had basically started, but the crowd noted that Peter had come in and they had a huge sign that said, "Get well, Motts." The grandstand crowd faced back at the grandstand to Peter and weren't watching the game that was in progress at that point of time. And he was bewildered that that would have happened. And they were just chanting Peter Motley.
Yeah, the roof went off. I mean, just cheering for, you know, a minute or 2 minutes or whatever. We knew exactly what it was. It was just great. Everyone was it was an emotional time to see him up and away, you know, with the horrific injuries.
Paul Meldrum's stellar run of form has abandoned him since the accident. Molly had polled 4 consecutive best of fields leading up to that fateful night. He will poll just 1 more for the entire season. Some put it down to the trauma he silently suffered. Meldrum dealing with the pain of that evening privately in an era when therapists and counselling were taboo words in the macho world of football.
Certainly my form dropped away quite drastically pretty soon after that, but I've always put that down to just a coincidence, just a coincidence. I was started to struggle with a groin strain, and the rest I just put down to form. I think my form just, for whatever reason, fell away, and I spent a couple of weeks in reserve.
I suppose at that time we didn't think there was any effect on Paul because he hadn't been involved in the accident, but there's no doubt that that did take a lot out of him, because mentally I think it probably unsettled him for the rest of the year, but we probably should have got him some counselling that time.
Would you do it differently now?
Yeah, looking back, I might have put my hand up, and just been stepped through the events, and yeah, I probably would have put my hand up, just from the counselling.
The Blues are also wrestling with a separate tragedy within their ranks. Dual premiership defender and popular clubman Des English has been diagnosed with cancer. Carlton finished the 1987 season as minor premiers, then win straight through to a shot at grand final day redemption against the Hawks. Peter Motley and Des English, a constant source of inspiration.
At a personal level, it put the football into perspective. I guess these were life battles going on outside with two teammates. It certainly galvanised the club. There's no doubt about that. That there was a job to be done on the field, but certainly that there was a driving motivation right through that season.
There were 3 players that the team had committed to. Peter, there was Bernie Evans, who'd been suspended in the second semi-final and wasn't able to play in the grand final, got a 1-week suspension, and the other one was Des English. And I can say this to you, I coached over 350 games. I reckon there might have been half a dozen times that I would have bet my house on the team winning. So it didn't happen very often. Going into that grand final, the resolve of the Carlton players was such, I knew we wouldn't lose.
They're a big part of it, Desi and Motts, and I don't think you keep bringing it up every minute of the day, but it's certainly focus, especially come finals time.
Not a word was said, but you didn't have to say a word. They were our 3 mates who couldn't be there and were doing it really hard, and we were not going to let them down.
It wouldn't have mattered what Rob said that day. It wouldn't have mattered at all where he put us, what positions. No, we're going to lose.
Carlton finish all over the Hawks to claim the 1987 premiership by 33 points. Thoughts immediately turning to the mates who couldn't be out there with them. Even in illness, Peter Motley has played his part in winning Carlton a premiership.
We knew where he was sitting in the crowd, and when the game was played and won, the boys ran to the boundary and they knew where he was, and they all pointed and, held up the medallions and you're part of this. It was a lovely moment.
Knights, Desi, Bernie, beautiful.
It was pretty crowded down the rooms, and Pete was there when we walked in, which was good. Everyone was giving him hugs, and I'm sure he was couldn't have been happier, but in the same breath, he would have been wishing he was out there.
Everyone was standing around Motts and Brattles with the photo, and it was a big moment. He was a huge part of that flag, and it was great that he was there for it, and I won't forget that photo. It was pretty emotional stuff.
Gee, there's been some emotional moments on Grand Final Day, but it's hard to forget the acknowledgement, the public acknowledgement from Kernahan and from Bradley in the rooms later.
He should be out there, It should be out there. I mean, it's not really fair, but life deals these things up, and it just rolls off the tongue when you say that, doesn't it? But when, for Pete's family and for Pete, and they cause of their own, I mean, it breaks your heart, doesn't it?
Whilst delighted to see his beloved Blues win the flag, Peter's absence from football is starting to take its toll on his mental state. Those close to him have allowed him to cling to his dream of one day returning to the field of battle. It has been the driving motivation behind his gruelling rehabilitation as he relentlessly pushes his body and mind. But by late 1988, some 18 months after the accident, the cruel reality that he will never play the game he lives for ever again is starting to hit Peter hard.
Peter wanted to believe for a long time he was going to be able to recover to a level of being able to be involved in the game again. We allowed that to continue and didn't discourage that because it was to help him positively try and gain ground.
The fact that I couldn't play football anymore, that's about the worst thing you could imagine. I was in a downer for 2 months, I guess. Not playing football again, it's
became quite depressed.
My life.
His main love and his main goal since he was a kid was to play on the big stage footy and do well. Not just to play, but to do well. And he was right on the cusp of it. So to have that taken away in a heartbeat through no action of your own, I mean, I would imagine that'd bring a pretty dark moment.
Peter is also starting to battle mental demons that are causing panic attacks the further he strays from the comfort zone of his Glenelg apartment. Over the next decade, these attacks will become more and more debilitating. Peter extremely uncomfortable in all modes of transport. Remarkably, despite him having no recollection of the crash or the weeks after it, Peter's mind has pieced together the trauma. Just the simple act of driving through a local intersection will send Peter's anxiety levels to paralysing heights. His condition is initially considered to be a form of agoraphobia, the fear of being in open or public places. Peter is at risk of becoming a complete recluse before leading Adelaide psychiatrist Professor Sandy McFarlane begins treating it as a post-traumatic stress disorder in the late 1990s. He remains on medication for the ailment, but has been able to once again take control of his life with the help of his remarkable family, particularly his late mother Gaynor and his ever-devoted father Jeff.
He all of a sudden couldn't go anywhere, had to stay here for a while. In this area, this zone, and couldn't get out. And this was an extremely frustrating difficulty for him. But again, we worked through it. We worked a program, put a arrangement together, and he won the battle again. He can now handle that.
Jeff was there every second, every minute of the day for Peter, and you know, he's given up a lot of his probably, as a heavy into business and that, he's given up a lot of his life to help his son, and it's just a great story, father and son working through a major ordeal, and Jeff deserves a lot of credit as well as Pete for the work he had to do, obviously himself, and they're great mates, and they've been through everything together.
He moved heaven and earth to try to give Pete the best possible chance of recovery, and hours and hours and hours of his own time to help the kid. Special bloke, Jeff Motley, special bloke. And Pete's very fortunate to have him as dad.
You make significant progress, it levels out, and then you have a downer again. And then you've got to find a way as to get it back up again and get the thoughts positive again. There was never a time when Peter wanted to give it away. He was just frustrated with the slowness that it took to make any sort of progress.
Pete had didn't do anything wrong, or he was just there, a victim of circumstance. And I guess you do think about the coincidence of it all. But, you know, I will say that Pete doesn't entertain, well, if he does entertain it, he doesn't entertain it in front of me or others. You know, if anyone talks like that, then he doesn't want to know about that. He's more just getting on with the job. Yeah, that's the way he thinks, which is really great.
I'm proud of the way he's handled it, particularly the way he's kept his same personality, his same natural, happy self as such. Not easy to do that.
To get through the way he did, and to work his body back to be where he is today and living a good life, and running Adelaide, I reckon he is there, especially down at Glenelg. We're all proud of him, and everyone loves Motts.
It's almost a miracle to see what he's got back from, because he was in a situation where the normal person out there, no way they would have pulled through. And for Pete to get back to what he is today is an unbelievable effort on Pete's behalf, but also his family.
He would have become one of the great icons of Australian football, not only because of the way that he played, but the way he carried himself. The character and personality that he brought to the game was something special. And we were deprived, as the football public and the Carlton Footy Club, of this wonderful player. And to me, that's one in a lifetime. Of the 40 years I've been in football, it's probably one of the 2 or 3 real tragedies that the game has produced for me.
We often talk about tragedies in sport and overuse the word because, we know what a real tragedy is. But I think in a sporting context, the loss of Peter Motley's football career was a genuine tragedy.
Wilma Rudolph, the US sprinter who overcame crippling polio to become a triple Olympic gold medalist, once said that if you can pick up after a crushing defeat and go on to win again, you are going to be a champion someday. No matter which way you define it, Peter Motley is a champion. A champion footballer, a champion son, a champion mate, and maybe most of all, a champion man. And whilst he was cruelly robbed of the opportunity to fully display his talents on football's biggest stage, he has nonetheless proven himself capable of doing what champions do best, inspiring us mere mortals to do better and be better ourselves. Thanks for your company for this edition of Headliners. Join us again when we next head back in time to revisit another of football's biggest stories right here on Fox Footy.
I love, so I talk with people and everyone. They know me around here just because I spoke to them and just enjoying life.
Do you think Peter Motley's a lucky man?
Yes, I am. I'm lucky I wasn't dead.